here we are. Welcome back to the ultimate SNK fighting game, Iceberg. As always, if this is the very first video in this series that you've stumbled upon, I highly recommend that you watch the other parts first, not only to see entries that won't be in this layer and beyond, but also the nature of the entries in this Iceberg, which you will learn about in part 1. As always, thank you for watching, and now let us delve into what I think is the most populous layer of this Iceberg, Layer 3. While there have been several Korean releases of SNK fighting games with some alterations and regional differences, the Samurai Showdown and Last Blade ports of the game contain some of the most major changes. Prior to the 1990s, South Koreans had no legal access to Japanese media as it had been banned via the 1945 law for punishing anti-national deeds. This law was a response to Japan's decade-long occupation of Korea, and the South Korean government enacted it immediately after the end of Japan's rule over the country. Starting in the 1990s, South Korea would undergo 4 stages of liberalization, gradually easing its ban on Japanese media over time. However, some restrictions and bans still applied at certain stages, such as media containing the Japanese language and containing certain displays of Japanese culture. This is what led to Samurai Showdown 2, 3, and 4 becoming completely renamed in the Korean market. Samsho 2 would become Sao Labi Spirits, Samsho 3 would become Fighter's Swords, which would additionally come with a palette swap of Gaida Caffeine named Kim Ung-shae, and Samsho 4 became Pei Wang Jung-sal, Legend of a Warrior. The Last Blade series also received name changes in the Korean market, with the first and second game being renamed The Last Soldier and The Last Soldier 2, respectively. Similar to the aforementioned character Gaida, several Last Blade characters would have their names changed. This went beyond just a bunch of name changes, as all of these games would also have varying degrees of audio censorship. This included muting certain portions of the game, such as a track mode, some of the announcers' voice lines, and replacing the characters' spoken lines with simple grunts. The violence was toned down, with blood either being entirely removed or colored white. In some of the Samsho games, the violence level is locked to 1, which in addition to coloring the blood white, also removes dismemberment and the various gory finishers.
This entry could be referring to 2 things. The first is the fact that some fans think that the KOF 14 South America team should have just been called Team Brazil. Sure, Zarina is originally from Colombia, and calling them Team South America would have covered all bases, but she also currently lives in Brazil, thus Team Brazil would have also worked. This could also be referring to how the team compositions in KOF 94 do not entirely match the countries they represent. The game's director, Toyohisa Tanabe, explained this inconsistency. The reason for this inconsistency was purely for our overseas markets. SNK wanted to target certain markets, which was common in the fighting game genre. You could see it in Street Fighter as well, where they have US versus Russia versus UK. So for KOF, we first established what countries we wanted to put in the game, and then we forced the characters into the teams, completely disregarding their backstories or relationships with those team countries. So it's kind of funny.
So I'm not gonna spend too much time on this, seeing that one of my peers advised that I refrain from saying the censored word in this entry so that YouTube doesn't go YouTube on me, but in short, the censored word is a term for adults who have a sexual interest in mid to late adolescence. Ergo, this theory likely stems from people who think that Elizabeth has much deeper feelings for Ash Crimson, and seeing that Ash Crimson was 16 when he debuted, This theory suggests that Elizabeth, who is in her mid to late 20s, likes them young, but not too young. You get it. Moving on. KOF Battle de Paradise is a handheld board-style game that first released on July 6, 2000 for the Neo Geo Pocket Color. Initially, it was a Japan-exclusive game until it was released as a part of Volume 2 of the Neo Geo Pocket Collection in 2022. The game involves players rolling a die and moving around a board consisting of squares, some of which trigger a variety of mini-games. These mini-games include quiz challenges, dodging contests, memory games, and so on. The object of the game is to collect more stars and coins than your opponent. Sound familiar? The gameplay even consists of cards that you can purchase in a shop, which can then be used to assist the player or target the opponent. There's even an alignment system in which the player can identify as good or bad, or as they're referred to in-game, justice and dark, respectively, which can alter certain events in the game, such as the outcome of meeting several notable SNK characters. Speaking of encountering said characters, the game's story is centered around 4 fanatics of KOF getting sucked into a mysterious KOF-themed world that lies within the Neo Geo Pocket. There are a couple of interesting things to note about this game, like for one, this game is known for its compatibility with the Japanese version of KOF 99 Evolution on the Dreamcast, which we talked about a little bit in the first layer of this iceberg. You could use any points you won in Battle de Paradise to get a jump on the leveling process for extra strikers in Evolution. It's also worth noting that the extra strikers in Evolution are the same ones in Battle de Paradise, but with a few extras. Also, if you inserted a cartridge of Battle de Paradise into the Neo Geo Pocket Color's predecessor, simply called the Neo Geo Pocket, a remake of one of SNK's oldest action games titled Yosaku would be playable. Finally, while KOF 2000 marked the playable debut of Hinako Shijo, it was in Battle de Paradise where we saw her for the very first time, as she would make a cameo in the data select screen. Soji Kusanagi is the brother of Aoi Kusanagi, both of whom are the cousins of Kyo Kusanagi. He was originally set to lead the Kusanagi clan for his generation. After becoming afflicted with an ailment that was reminiscent of the Riot of the Blood, he decided to abandon his training and move from Osaka to Tokyo. When Kyo goes to meet him there, Soji reveals a dark secret behind the Kusanagi power. This all occurs in the 1998 visual novel The King of Fighters Kyo, which is where we are formally introduced to Soji. However, he would make a cameo in another game that came out the same year. In one of the stills shown during the ending credits of KOF 98, Soji is shown training alongside his cousin Kyo and his uncle Saishu.
Dragon is a character that debuted in the very first World Heroes game. World Heroes is a fighting game series that was developed by ADK with assistance from SNK, the latter of whom would purchase the IPs of the former upon the bankruptcy. As I'm sure you know, the late great Bruce Lee has a slew of video game characters modeled after and inspired by him. Dragon has the distinction of being one of the earliest of said characters in the history of fighting games, preceding the likes of more well-known characters such as Liu Kang and, even Fei Long.
In the previous layer of the iceberg, we talked about the rather buggy and glitchy arcade port of KOF 13 that was used at the 2010 Tougeki tournament, which ran from September 18th to 19th. On the other end, there was a special Tougeki version of KOF 2002 UM that was released June 24th of 2010 for the PS2 in Japan. Basically, being created and prepped for said tournament, this port has the hidden boss characters disabled, though they are apparently playable through some tempering, and includes some balance adjustments to some of the characters.
As is the case with most alternate color palettes in fighting games, it's not too surprising to see a host of Easter eggs and references to other characters in media. We'd be on this entry almost all day if we went over each and every single reference, so I'll just go over some of the random ones that I found interesting. For one, I love how some of Raiden's alternate colors are wrestling references. These include Tiger Mask, Zangief, and of course, the Hulkster. Arguably his coolest palette is based on Marvel Comics' Venom. One of his funniest ones comes with his Big Bear hidden costume, where he is Winnie the Pooh. Do you get it? One reoccurring type of homage you'll see amongst the 13 roster are color palettes based on other KOF characters. Kyo, Mature, Vice, and Kula all have palettes based on Iori. Robert has one based on Terry, Terry has one based on Robert, Duolan has a color palette based on his half-sister Xiaolan. My personal favorite Rio palette is him as Mr. Karate 2. Finally, just to wrap it up, Ash has a Joker color palette. How befitting. Iori's sister has been quite a mystery for the longest of time. What is certain about her is that she is indeed canon despite never making any mainline canon appearances in the KOF games. It is also confirmed that she is younger than Iori. With such a limited amount of info about her, therein lies many questions such as whether she's a full-blooded sibling, a half-sibling, or an adoptive sibling. This info in turn would reveal whether or not she carries the potential for Riot of the Blood, the Yagami Flames, and could bring aspects about the maternal mortality curse into question. This post from a Redditor makes a strong case that she is not adopted, but nevertheless, the mystery still remains. Something we do know about Iori's sister is that in a 1998 Neo Geo Freak poll, out of 134 characters, she took the number 63 spot with 70 votes. Mind you, this is a character that is canon, yet has never appeared on screen or been playable in a KOF game. You wanna know who placed right below her in this poll? This guy. Yeah.
Also known as the King of Fighters Z, which sounds more like a KOF Dragon Ball Z crossover, KOF Zillion is an SNK Play More sponsored 45-volume manhwa series illustrated and conceived by Andy Sato. Like several other adaptations, the series isn't canon. The manhwa is notable for the appearance of a character that many have compared to Miss X. There's also a Mugen out there that goes by the name KOF Zillion.
Those of you who watched my 10 fascinating facts about Terry Bogard video may actually remember Kelly. For those of you that don't, and some of you probably might just remember Kelly because you might have played this game, Kelly is a Terry Bogard tribute character you can encounter in the RPG game Shadow Heart's Covenant. You encounter him through side quests in which you play the White Wolf Blanca, and what do you know, these side quests are called Wolf Bouts. Yeah. Aside from obvious signs like the red and white cap, the primary element of Kelly's attacks is fire, which Terry has utilized sometimes before, and not to mention, Kelly and Terry both have unisex names. In revisiting this bit of trivia, I found out something that I didn't know when I had did the Terry video. So, as some of you probably know, Aruze, who actually published Shadow Heart's Covenant in Japan and owns the license to the series, actually has a checkered history with SNK and are a big, if not the reason why SNK became Playmore, and then when they got their stuff back on track, they became SNK Playmore. What I want to highlight with this is that in October of 2002, Aruze was actually sued by SNK Playmore for copyright infringement over SNK's IPs. The Osaka District Court actually ruled in favor of SNK in January of 2004, which was roughly a month right before Shadow Heart's Covenant came out. Make of that what you will.
Unknown is a maniac striker for Kasumi Toto that debuted as such in KOF 2000. I say as such because the man behind the guise of Unknown, Ryuhaku Toto, actually debuted in 1992 in the first Art of Fighting game. That was his final major playable appearance in an SNK fighting game, as he quote-unquote disappeared after getting whooped by Ryo to train for a runback. He wouldn't make a major playable appearance in a fighting game until Capcom vs SNK 2, of all games. That was the last notable fighting game in which he was playable. Unknown Toto would return in KOF 2002 UM during one of Kasumi's supers.
Though only a handful of characters got alternate costumes in KOF 14, there were seemingly many more originally planned. Mai practically had a treasure trove of alternate costumes, none of which made it into the game. The same could also be said for King, Yuri, and Angel. Ryo had a business suit alternate costume, as well as his Mr. Karate 2 attire, which I hope we'll see sometime in the future given what happened in KOF 15. Shunei had some unused alternates as well, some of which still incorporate elements of his default outfit, such as the cape jacket and the rolled up pants leg. Arguably the most interesting one is this one, where he has cat ear headphones. His BFF Meitenkun has an alt where he is in a full-on sheep costume. The other two concepts were seemingly merged into his KOF 14 alternate costume, with him keeping the striped pajamas and having the cat pillow. Similar to his bestie, he even has some cat-themed headgear in the form of a hat with cat ears. The rest of the outfit is rather reminiscent of sailor uniforms. There is even a Triceratops alt for KOD, and the fact that it didn't make the cut infuriates me. What's interesting about some of these scrapped costumes is that SNK would revisit or utilize them in later games. Mui Mui had a scrapped full-on panda outfit and would carry over the panda motif into one of her SNK heroines alternates. In KOF 15, Garo Terry, or the Wild Wolf as he's known in Maximum Impact, would appear as a pre-order bonus minus any headgear. Business Suit Geese would be the default for the Southtown mob boss. Kim would return with a modified version of his scrapped KOF 14 outfit, and even Sylvie had some darker, more gothy outfits scrapped prior to the reveal of her newest design in KOF 15. Then there are those scrapped costumes that were also nods to other SNK characters, such as Angel as Tizak and Kim in a prison jumpsuit similar to Chang and the outfit of Kim Soo-il. The Fatal Fury / KOF character Kim Kapwan is named after the real-life Kim Kapwan, the chairman and founder of the Korean game company Vicom. And before I continue, from here on, I'm going to refer to the real-life Kim Kapwan as the real Kim, and I'll be calling the fighting game character SNK Kim from here on, because we're going to be going back and forth a little bit between the two. Anyways, the real Kim Kapwan was also a Taekwondo practitioner, ranking as a 3rd Dan. It has been said that he traveled with and was an assistant to the Japanese Korean wrestler Riki Dozan, who would go on to become known as the father of Puroresu, or Japanese wrestling, and establish himself as one of the most influential figures in pro wrestling history. As an SNK fighting game and pro wrestling fan, when I came across this, I was initially blown away, but I couldn't find a concrete second source on this info, so yeah, fill me in if you know anything. The real-life Kim's connections to SNK Kim go far beyond just the name and him being a Taekwondo practitioner himself. The real Kim had collaborated with SNK and even imported some SNK video game arcade machines into South Korea, which, if you recall the little history lesson we learned earlier in this iceberg, was pretty much illegal. In 1989, a Korean man had actually gotten arrested for smuggling and reselling machines of the SNK game Mechanized Attack into South Korea without paying for the rights to the game and hardware. Seeing that he had the right to distribute SNK games in South Korea, which made him a victim of this crime, Kim Kapwan, the real Kim, was summoned to court to give testimony. He gave a passionate speech with one of its main points emphasizing the importance of justice and punishment for the criminal so that he could rehabilitate himself. Yeah. As some of you probably know, the sons of SNK Kim are also named after real-life people that are linked to the real Kim. Kim Dong-hwan is named after the real Kim's younger brother, and Kim Jae-hoon is named after the real Kim's son, both of whom would also go on to hold high positions in Vicom. For more about the story of the real-life Kim Kapwan, I recommend Secrets of Games' video if you haven't seen it already. It's fantastic.
Armor Ralph is an alternate version of Ralph Jones that first appeared in KOF Maximum Impact 2. He's more brash than Ralph and is infamous for being an insanely broken character. While it may seem like a major drawback that he cannot block at all, true to his name, he has an absurd amount of armor on his attacks, priority, and he does much more damage than regular Ralph. This will result in him being removed from KOF Maximum Impact Regulation A, along with some game modes. His data is within the game, but he is unselectable.
Team Samsho in KOF 95 and 96 is something that I've discussed a couple of times in previous videos, and more than likely became a big topic when the possibility of a Samsho team being in KOF 15 first leaked to the public. Starting as early as 1995, SNK had been attempting to incorporate a Samurai Showdown team into KOF. Seeing that KOF is a massive crossover of notable SNK franchises, it makes total sense. Time constraints would prevent the Samsho team from making their mainline KOF debut in 95 and 96. Nakoruru would be playable in the Game Boy version of 95 and would later make her mainline canon KOF debut in 14 as the leader of Team Another World. Of course, as we all know, come KOF 15, a Samsho team would finally make it into a mainline KOF game, simply going by the name Team Samurai. This team consisted of a returning Nakoruru, accompanied by Haomaru and Darlie Dagger. Obviously, Darlie was not on the Samsho team that was pitched for KOF 95 and 96, as she hadn't debuted yet. Instead, Nakoruru and Haomaru would have been accompanied by Galford. Team Samurai came to be in 15 due in part to Darlie's popularity stemming from her Samsho 7 debut, and Team Another World disbanding after the rights to Love Heart and Mui Mui had been sold.
In short, Kyo 1 and Kyo 2's creation purpose is all about school uniforms. Kyo Kusanagi had been redesigned for KOF 99, but some of the designers desired for him to return with this school uniform. As they were nearing the end of production, the staff hadn't decided which school uniform they wanted the Kyo clone to wear. To resolve this issue, 2 Kyo clones were created and drawn right on the spot.
The 10 Sacred Treasures are a central part of the KOF EX games. These games follow an alternate timeline in which a wounded Kyo was not found by Nest, but by a young girl named Moe Habana, who nurses him back to health. Concerned for his safety, she teams up with him in both of the tournaments in the KOF EX games on the hero team. In this alternate timeline, there are 10 Sacred Treasures rather than 3, and all of the newly introduced playable characters in the KOF EX offshoot are guardians of them. Moe guards the Yatsuka no Tsurugi, Reiji Ogami guards the Hetsu Kagami, and the final boss Shinobu Amo guards the Makaru Kaishi no Tama. Iori's teammates Jun Kagami and Shinobu's sister Mio Kurosaki also guard Sacred Treasures, but they have never been formally identified. Some of you may find the names of these identified Sacred Treasures familiar, as this element of the storyline is based on the Tokuso no Kandakara, or the Jushu Shimpo, or the real-life 10 Sacred Treasures. Apparently, there are some theories that compare these 10 treasures to the 3 Sacred Treasures that we're familiar with, but of course, that took me down a rabbit hole, which is pretty much a video's worth of information itself, but there you go, moving on.
The KOF year-end party is basically what it sounds like. This was a special KOF themed event held by SNK that took place in the month of December and was open to a limited number of fans. The inaugural year-end party was held to celebrate the 10th anniversary of KOF. The party would have had fun events such as talk shows featuring voice actors, developers, designers, location tests, tournaments, quiz contests, and most notably, early news for upcoming KOF related media. Also, regardless of whether or not fans bought anything from the booths at the event, they wouldn't leave empty-handed as they were given take-home bags of SNK merchandise. You can read about some of the notable occurrences at these events online. It's quite a lot. Though I will point out the one thing that interested me the most. Allegedly, at the 2005 event, Falcon stated that he regrets not including World Heroes characters in KOF and would love to see them in 3D. It is worth noting that this was en route to KOF Maximum Impact 2, and SNK had bought up ADK's trademark and relinquished IPs back in 2003. Aya and Hermione are minor characters who are Rugal's lesser-known secretaries. Though they are seemingly meant to replace or stand in for Vice and Mature, they are not considered canon as all of their KOF appearances are in Dream Match games. The KOF 95 Smash Bros. Connection stems from an arcade experience involving a young Masahiro Sakurai, the creator of the Super Smash Bros. Series. The story goes that while he had originally intended to play the King of Fighters 95 alone, someone had actually joined him. Sakurai approached the matches with a competitive attitude and dominated the matches. Given how the machine was structured, he couldn't immediately see who he was playing on the other end. However, he was able to steal a glance by using the reflections in some nearby windows and saw that his opponent was a young lady accompanied by her boyfriend who was watching the matches. This led to Sakurai feeling rather regretful for convincingly beating someone who was a novice, just looking to have fun with the game. Feeling that he might have ruined the experience and discouraged the woman from ever picking up a fighting game ever again, Sakurai would note this experience as an inspiration for creating the Super Smash Bros. Series, hoping to produce a fighting game that would be more accessible to beginners. Topless Blue Mary is referring to an Easter egg in Real Bout Fatal Fury that could only be seen on the Southtown Sound Beach. In order to trigger this Easter egg, Blue Mary must win the round by having both her opponent and Mary herself fall out of bounds into the water. Mary would pop up out of the water, and upon realizing that she is topless, she would quickly cover up. This Easter egg was completely cut out of the PS2 version of the game.
KOF Maximum Impact Regulation A is the only official KOF fighting game with a third-party guest character, and that character is Makoto Mizuguchi from Fighters History, a fighting game franchise created by Data East. Data East had declared bankruptcy in 2003, roughly 5 years before the release of Maximum Impact Regulation A. SNK, then going by SNK Playmore, had signed a mutual use deal with Gmode, who held the rights to Fighters History, to utilize their characters in their games, and that is how Makoto Mizuguchi made it in the game. There's a bit more to this story, but we'll actually get to that a little bit later. Not to be confused with the Alice that most of you know from KOF 14, that's Alice Garnett Nakata. Alice Chrysler is a Fatal Fury character that was set to make her playable debut in Fatal Fury 3. She trains in Taekwondo under Kim Kapwan and is apparently a Terry Bogard fan. Her admiration for the latter is more than likely what has led some to believe that she served as something of an inspiration for Alice Nakata. Alice Chrysler would only make minor cameo appearances in Fatal Fury and KOF. The last time she was ever mentioned in an SNK fighting game was in the profile of Che Lim in KOF Maximum Impact 2. Alice's overt fangirling of Terry Bogard led to an outburst from Che Lim, with the latter yelling at the former about how the King of Fighters isn't a dating game, which is hilarious in hindsight considering Days of Memories had just started the year before Maximum Impact 2 was released, and KOF for Girls would come out over a decade later. Getting back to the current entry though, Alice Chrysler's Fatal Fury 3 slot would have instead gone to Mai Shiranui due to the latter becoming quickly a fan favorite. So in essence, no Mai no Bai could have probably happened a lot earlier. Mr. Taekwondo and Korean Athena were proposed ideas and concepts for Kim Kapwan and Mei Lee Jinju respectively. Originally, SNK was considering including Kim in the first Maximum Impact game, but under the alias Mr. Taekwondo, in the same vein as Takuma and Ryo Sakazaki both being Mr. Karate at certain points. As a matter of fact, Ryo actually bears said mantle in KOF Maximum Impact 2. The Mr. Taekwondo idea was scrapped due to some alleged complaints from veteran designers, and it had been decided that they would include a similar character instead. Jun-hoon, Puriki One's So Young Sung, and Mei Lee Jinju were considered, but SNK instead decided to create another original female Taekwondo fighter that would go on to become Che Lim. Speaking of Mei Lee, Eolith's desire for a new Korean fighter to appease to the Korean KOF fanbase is what brought about her creation. She was originally designed to be an idol-like visual fighter, quite literally being a Korean Athena. Instead, designers leaned more into a Kamen Rider superhero gimmick that would go on to become the Mei Lee Jinju we've got today. Similar to Kim, Mei Lee was also named after a real-life executive, more specifically the person who was in charge of Eolith at the time. Oh, and one more thing. Hashtag make Mei Lee playable again, hashtag bring back Mei Lee, hashtag Mei Lee Jinju for KOF 15. Yes, I said it, yet again, get mad, I don't care. Next entry. The Samurai Showdown 2019 art book titled The Art of Samurai Showdown revealed quite a bit of cut content. Neo Geo Now did a video talking about some of said scrap content if you haven't seen it already. There's a monk who apparently utilizes chopsticks as weapons, there's a nun with a bunch of hidden weapons from the sword infused into her biwa to a bunch more concealed under her jacket. There's a young female smoker who has a huge dragon-shaped pipe, which empowers her the more she smokes, and she apparently coughs when she smokes too much. Surprise, surprise. Then there's this samurai with a very cool traditional design. There's this tall, muscular woman who could have very well been a concept character or even an inspiration for Darlie, armed with a double-bladed sword that she can also dual wield and use as a boomerang. Speaking of Darlie, Nobuyuki Kuroki had alluded to this Hakeshi character sometime before, as this character is basically where her design started. Then there's this character, a former Buddhist monk who fights using a bench. I personally feel like this character was incredibly close to making the cut, as there were plenty of details about him, with one thing that amused me the most, aside from his weapon choice, is the fact that he doesn't like fights, yet finds himself constantly in them, and apparently he constantly gets arrested for dine and dashing. There were also a couple of stages that got scrapped as well, with one of them being Darlie Daggers, and it annoys me that it didn't make it in. This stage is a shipyard situated on the tropical beach of Madagascar, which also wraps into a mystery surrounding something else with Darlie, which we'll get to in another layer of the iceberg. The other stage is Earthquakes, which is a hideout full of gold and riches that he more than likely stole. What's interesting about this stage is that one of the notable items in this hideout is the mask of Mudman from World Heroes. So did these two cross paths or something?
Lily McGuire and Angelina are both characters that originated from SNK fighting game adaptations, that being Fatal Fury, Legend of the Hungry Wolf, and The King of Fighters, Destiny, respectively. Many fans have made comparisons between the two, obviously not so much in terms of design, but their roles in both storylines, seeing that they both have some link to Geese. They both get lovey-dovey with Terry, both of them attempt to kill Terry by poisoning him, and so on. Ryo Sakazaki created KOF is exactly what it says, but probably not in the way you're thinking. This has nothing to do with the lore or storylines, but is actually about the fact that his well-received Fatal Fury special guest appearance was one of the factors that led to the creation of the KOF series. This is also pretty interesting considering in the storyline, Ryo is the inaugural KOF champion. Ryo Sakazaki's guest appearance in Fatal Fury Special also makes him one of the earliest guest characters in fighting game history.
Remember earlier in this Iceberg when I said there was more to the whole mutual use deal between SNK and G-Mode? Well, here's the other part of that story. On G-Mode's end of the deal, they would release Garo Densetsu vs. Fighters History Dynamite in the year 2007. This is a Japan-exclusive crossover side-scrolling beat-em-up mobile game where you can play as Terry, Mai, or Makoto Mizuguchi. The enemies are also a mixture of characters from the two franchises, with some being cannon fodder, others basically serving as mid-bosses, and of course, the final bosses are Karnov and Geese. There are also mixtures of stages, sprites, and music from both franchises as well. Lane switching, which was also possible in some of the Fatal Fury games, was also in this game. While there is a bit of storyline in this game, none of it ties into either series and is exclusive to just this game.
Bao and Hugo's hair is referring to an intro animation with Hugo where Bao is atop his head. Just before the round begins, he seemingly vanishes into his hair. Yeah. Bao is actually seen throughout several other animations with Hugo in this game, though it is a mystery as to why of all people he's hanging out with them in Poison. It is worth noting that none of the Psycho Soldier teammates are in this game, and Bao more than likely does not know Princess Athena. Some speculations include Bao being drawn to Hugo due to the latter's childlike mannerisms and Bao possibly being a wrestling fan. Maybe there might be something more here, but I'm personally just gonna chalk this up to being something that the devs thought was funny.
KOF 94 had a couple of teams that did not make the final cut for the game. Some were modified slightly in certain ways later down the line, and others went entirely unused. This trio, referred to as the Beast Team, were entirely scrapped from the game. One appears to have a pet monkey, another looks to be the muscle of the trio, and then there is one dressed in a wolf outfit. SNK has stated that this Tarzan Bigfoot inspired trio was originally going to be the Brazil team. Then there's this trio, the Circus Team, which consisted of a Grandmaster, or I guess Ringmaster in this case, and two clowns. The team also didn't make it into the game, though I'd love to see this concept revisited in a future KOF game. Speaking of revisiting, there was the Dance Team, who were designed in the hopes of evoking a more European atmosphere. While the team's gimmick is pretty obvious from the name alone, one of the members of the team may look a bit familiar, as said character would go on to become Heavy D. The Prisoner team here also has a familiar face, that being Chang Kohan. For the most part, he looks very much like the Chang we all know, just with a striped jumpsuit, and instead of one ball and chain, he has three. His teammates are definitely not any of the ones we're familiar with, as one of them is armed with daggers, and the other is clad in a scorpion tank top, handcuffs, and armed with knuckle dusters. Interestingly, SNK did revisit this concept many years later in KOF 14, as that game would get a prisoner team known as Team Villains. While Xanadu was definitely an interesting character, I would have loved to have seen Chang and Choi teaming up with one of these guys, especially the Scorpion dude. Finally, there's this team, which from what I could gather is called Xie Chao, or the Evil Cult Team, which I've also seen some sources say that Evil Cult is an often common mistranslation of Xie Chao, but when you look at this team, they do look like evil cultists, honestly. Like the Circus and Beast teams, Xie Chao in its entirety did not make it into KOF 94, and from what I can tell, the concept hasn't been revisited in the series, and if you ask me, this is the team that I'd love to see in a future game. Autohide, Rose, and Magaki were supposed to debut earlier is more than likely referring to the fact that there exist unused concepts of the aforementioned characters that were produced before they officially debuted in the series. The siblings, Autohide and Rose, both made their mainline KOF debuts in KOF 2003. However, there are a couple of concept sketches of the two of them that were apparently produced around the time of KOF 99's development. Magaki made his grueling mainline KOF debut as the dastardly final boss of KOF 11. Concept art of him exists even earlier than both of Rugal's kids, dating all the way back to KOF 98. The existence of these sketches could very well be a hint that these characters were set to debut much earlier, or perhaps it was too early to bring them out. I assume the latter is more than likely the actual reason, given how all three of these characters were important to the Ash Saga. KOF 14's director Yasuki Oda was indeed a training dummy, but not within a SNK fighting game, if that's where you thought this was going. In quite a funny twist, he was actually a real-life training dummy. Oda stated that Blue Mary had always been a challenge to animate due to the complexity of her grappling moves. Apparently, there weren't many people on the team that were familiar with her fighting style, Commando Sambo. Oda even stated that one of her designers, Yoichiro Soeda, actually performed a couple of Sambo techniques on him to show off some attacks he had in mind for Mary. Oda even jokingly stated that watching Mary's KOF 14 trailer made his neck hurt. From what I could tell, Kuro-chan is apparently a staff nickname for Rodem, or Rodemu, Rugal's pet Black Panther. In a confusing twist, this interview I found with the KOF 94 dev team states that Rodem is actually the nickname, so I don't know. Nevertheless, what is interesting about this is that in CVS2, there's a team dialogue that seems to reference this little name-game discrepancy? I don't know. The dialogue in question is a win quote between Rugal, obviously, and Yuri. The latter calls the former's pet Black Panther, Kuro-chan, much to his chagrin.
According to an interview with Polygon, Yasushi Adachi pointed to 4 games that inspired him whilst creating and developing Samurai Showdown. Street Fighter 2 because of the system's collision handling, Mortal Kombat because of the moody setting in a serious battle, Klax because he liked the effects and impact from blows, and Dragon Spirit, which served as the inspiration for the Japanese name of the series, Samurai Spirits.
Benimaru is a hypocrite is referring to the fact that he dislikes otakus. Otaku is a Japanese term used to describe people whom are perceived to have obsessive interests. Though this could apply to a myriad of things, this term is usually applied to things such as anime, manga, video games, cosplay, and so on. Though Benny Boy is quite fashionable, he is practically a runway of anime and manga homages, not limited to just his looks, but more notably several attacks, quotes, and mannerisms. Again, much like the entry in the previous layer of the iceberg where we talked about Angel doing the Rock's choreographed moves in a legitimate fighting tournament, you've got this guy doing moves that he saw in anime and manga in a legitimate fighting tournament. Like Angel, he definitely makes it work with his electrifying powers, but doing a bunch of anime and manga influenced attacks in a legitimate fighting tournament and you dislike otakus? Hey, Benny.
That's you! That's you! That is you! That is you!
Ricky Jones is one of the playable characters in the 1992 SNK beat-em-up Mutation Nation. While it may not be as noticeable in-game, if you look at Ricky on the game's cover, he bears a resemblance to one Kyoku Sanagi, who wouldn't debut until roughly 2 years later. Whether or not Ricky served as an inspiration for Kyo is unknown. Street Smart is a notable 1989 beat-em-up developed and published by SNK. The King of Fighters The Ultimate History book refers to Street Smart as SNK's first foray into a fighting-based game. The game is infamous for being pretty difficult, as opponents were pretty difficult to take down. You can choose between Karate Man, who has constantly been likened to Takuma Sakazaki, and Crusher/Wrestler, and take on a whole host of enemies in a fighting tournament. The team that would develop Street Smart would go on to produce Fatal Fury. Speaking of Fatal Fury, when you play versus matches in that game, the theme song for the very first stage in Street Smart can also be heard. With all these parallels with two of SNK's most notable fighting game franchises, you'd think Street Smart is part of the shared universe. We cannot confirm that one way or the other.
Robert has undergone a couple of glow-ups over his long history across many fighting games. He was revealed with yet another redesign upon his KOF 14 reveal. In the KOF 14 art book, Kuroki stated that his redesign was based on an unspecified, famous American actor. The funny thing about this is that I've always likened him to Orlando Bloom. When I saw KOF 14 Robert, I always said this is what I'd imagine Will Turner would look like in a more modern, classy outfit. However, it was clearly not him Kuroki was referring to. It's additionally hilarious that I got the wrong cast member from Pirates of the Caribbean. The current Robert Garcia is actually a dead ringer for the famous American actor Johnny Depp. The right movie, wrong actor. Dang it. Axel Hawk replaced Michael Max in Fatal Fury 2 is exactly what it says, and from what I can tell, this is a rumor, but yet I think it's essentially true. It's worth noting that both of these characters are both boxers, they're both friends, and they have a student-teacher relationship. The most interesting parallel between the two is that not only do they utilize a tornado upper attack, but they have the exact same soundbite for said attack. Tornado upper! Tornado upper! This alone doesn't prove that Axel Hawk was actually Mike's replacement because, yet again, storyline wise, it would make sense that they would share a technique seeing they train together. The fact they have the same exact voice line is, I was gonna say slightly odd, but this probably was a common practice back in the day. But I mean, I'd chalk this up to basically being a given, if you ask me. This entry is referring to one of the earliest KOF 14 reveal trailers. The trailer in question features Team South America's resident ninja fanatic Banderas fighting with his obsession, Mai Shiranui. If you look closely in this trailer, you'll notice that Banderas' name is spelled without the I. The cool thing about this is that Bandeiras means flags in Spanish, whilst Bandeiras also means flags but in Portuguese. More than likely, the change to bandeiras was probably done to be consistent with the character, given that he is Brazilian and Portuguese is the country's official language.
Fighting game characters from different franchises having similarities isn't anything too new. However, in the case of Billy and Axel Lowe, it's actually pretty crazy in a fascinating sort of way. Both of them are Londoners, have the same blood type, have the same height and weight, have blonde hair and blue eyes, fight with a long-range weapon which they can also enhance with fire, and both of their designs were inspired by a mixture of Axl Rose and punk grunge fashion. The similarities don't stop there, as both of them even share a birthday, that being December 25th. What makes this even crazier is they share that birthday with at least 2 other characters from their respective companies. Finally, both of these characters even share a voice actor in Kaiichi Nanba.
When most people think of KOF's Iori making a playable guest appearance in a fighting game, most would assume you were talking about Million Arthur Arcana Blood. However, Iori actually did this much earlier, within yet another SNK fighting game. He made a playable appearance in the Game Boy version of Real Bout Fatal Fury Special as a hidden boss, making this one of the rare times a KOF original would make an appearance in a series that preceded KOF. While sure it's on a handheld port that more than likely didn't get as much attention as the major releases, it's still pretty fascinating.
Revolutionary Etude R2 are 2 compositions that make up Adelheide's KOF 2003 theme. Revolutionary Etude is a solo piano composition by Polish composer Frédéric Chopin written in 1831 and is the song that plays through the first 40 or so seconds of the theme. R2 is the heavier portion of the song that follows afterward.
The SNK vs Capcom error screens are pretty cool and hilarious. SNK vs Capcom, the Match of the Millennium, is a crossover fighting game first released on the Neo Geo Pocket Color in Japan on December 22, 1999. Similar to KOF Battle de Paradise, there was a hidden Easter egg involving inserting the game into the Neo Geo Pocket. Instead of a hidden classic game, the player would be shown screens involving characters from SNK and Capcom telling the player that the game can only be played on the Neo Geo Pocket Color. These error screens contain some humorous dialogue between 2 or more characters, including Alex and K-Dash questioning if they'll be in any future games, King lamenting not being in the game and telling the player to buy KOF R1 since she's in it, and Not Me Chris and Yashiro thirsting over Shermie decked out in Morrigan's outfit. These screens would only appear in the Japanese versions of the game, and the screenshots you see here were provided by SNK trivia extraordinaire Raito ADV and were translated by Kishi from GameFAQs. So big shoutouts to both of them. Mature is Adelheid and Rose's mother is exactly what it says, and it's a theory that I've talked about on this channel before. The theory cites the fact that Adelheid does look like he could be a mix between Rugal and Mature, as well as the fact they all use a similar wall slamming super. Someone even applied genetics concepts to this theory, pointing out how being blonde is a recessive trait and is strongly guaranteed if both parents are blonde. There's even variations of this theory that state that Mature is Adelheide's mother and Vice is Rose's mother. From what I can tell, the only reasoning behind this variation of the theory is just how the personalities of Adelheid and Rose are a reflection of Mature and Vice respectively. I personally don't think that's the most convincing of evidence. There are several debunks to these theories, most of which point out age discrepancies, plus if Mature was the mother, Adelheid and Rose will be part Orochi, which doesn't seem to be the case at all. It's an interesting theory, but one that is pretty much bunk, if you ask me. The Fuin series, or as it's more commonly known, the Savage Rain series, is a fighting game series developed by SNK that debuted in 1995. The series consists of only 2 games, Savage Rain and Kizuna Encounter Super Tag Battle. The Savage Rain series has been sometimes referred to as a fusion of several other SNK or SNK adjacent fighting games. It was a weapon fighter, like Sam showed before it, albeit the weapons in this game are arguably more weird. You can switch between the background and foreground like Fatal Fury. The game also has alternate KO sequences and large scaling sprites akin to Art of Fighting. What's cool about these 3 games is that Savage Rain is within the same shared universe as the 3, taking place in a futuristic Southtown that is renamed Jipang City. The storyline of the first game involves a mysterious fighter by the name of King Lion who puts Jipang City on notice, issuing a challenge to all powerful fighters to battle him in a fighting tournament known as Battle of the Beast Gods. It is then later revealed that King Lion was a pawn and basically an imitator of the real big bad, King Leo. Both are defeated by the main protagonist Sho Hayate, a practitioner of a hybrid of karate with the usage of a boomerang called Fuinken, who's also known for his trademark scream. I love that soundbite. The sequel, Kizuna Encounter Super Tag Battle, takes place 1 year after the events of Savage Rain. Desiring revenge on Hayate and everyone else that wronged him, King Leo organizes a second Battle of the Beast Gods with a new stipulation: tag team matches, which is exactly the format the gameplay was built around. The main protagonists of the game are the duo of Rosa, armed with a katana and fighting with a self-styled version of Kenjutsu, and Kim Soo-il, a Korean detective armed with a bow staff and fighting with a hybrid of Bojutsu and Taekwondo. His usage of the latter fighting style, similarities in appearance, his strong sense of justice, and the fact he was a striker for him in KOF 2000 have caused some to speculate that he is related to Kim Kapwan. Make of that what you will. I've seen people say it's true, and other sources saying SNK has denied this. Getting back to the tag team format, Kizuna Encounter would actually precede another more well-known tag team fighting game by 5 days, X-Men vs. Street Fighter. Karnov's Revenge is a 1994 fighting game developed by Data East. It is the second installment of the fighting game franchise Fighter's History, and is the first and only one from said series to be published by SNK for the Neo Geo and Neo Geo CD. The game is alternatively known as Fighter's History Dynamite, which was mentioned earlier in the Iceberg. The inaugural Fighter's History game is infamously known for being targeted by a copyright infringement lawsuit from Capcom, who claimed the game was too similar to Street Fighter II, noting similarities between certain characters, artwork, special moves, and controls. The court ruled in favor of Data East on the grounds that the elements Capcom claimed were copied from them were sin affair, or obligatory features within a genre, thus not protected by copyright. In the sequel, Karnov's Revenge, one of the similarities the game had to Street Fighter would be done away with, as the game reduced the amount of attack buttons from 6 to 4. This change was made due to the game running on the Neo Geo hardware. Other changes include smoother movement and more combo-focused gameplay. Other than that, Karnov's Revenge retains its gameplay, including its unique weak point mechanic, which involves a character becoming dizzy after getting hit 3 times on a specific part of their body. These weak points are usually pieces of clothing such as masks, headbands, or breastplates. The storyline is rather telltale considering one of the game's titles. The main antagonist and Data East mascot, Karnov, holds a second installment of his Great Grapple Tournament to get revenge after being beaten in the first one. While the main protagonist of Fighter's history is Ray McDougal, there's that name again, the real breakout star of the franchise is of course Makoto Mizuguchi, who we talked about earlier. I'm loving how some of these entries are connecting to one another. The shared origin of K-Dash and Maxima's designs can be traced back to the 1998 fighting game Daraku Tenshi, also known as The Fallen Angels. Both were designed by Shinichi Morioka. Whilst working on The Fallen Angels, he would design a slim, goth guy in leather by the name of Cool, and a cybernetically enhanced US Marine named Harry Ness. After The Fallen Angels was released, Morioka would migrate over to work for SNK and utilize elements of Cool and Harry's design for K-Dash and Maxima respectively. The idea of giving K-Dash shades was apparently inspired by the Fallen Angels character Haji Mibu. K-Dash and Maxima's names also come from the same source, the anime series Armored Trooper Votoms. Maxima is named after the Mecha ATM FX1 Zerberus VR Maxima, which looking at this now, probably also inspired his color scheme as well. K-Dash on the other hand is supposedly named after a clone character of one of the protagonists, Kane McDougal. From what I could garner, there isn't an English version of the manga, which from what I understand is a spin-off of Armored Trooper Votoms, and I'm still learning Japanese, so ergo, it was pretty tricky for me to find information about all this, so do not hesitate to share if I got something mixed up so far. Since we're talking about Armored Trooper Votoms, it's also worth noting that this anime series and the main character Kiriko QV are the less cited influence on K49's design, since most people usually talk about the whole Tetsuo debacle, which we soon found out was faked. Additionally, it's been suggested that K49's new alias, Cronin McDougal, was also inspired by the aforementioned character Kane McDougal. SNK really likes Armored Trooper Votoms, and seeing what I saw while I was researching this, I'm actually interested in this series as well. Remember in the last layer we talked about the KOF-12 website seemingly hinting at Mai and K-Dash being in the game and ultimately they didn't make it in? Well, the data allegedly found on KOF-12's disks seems to suggest that they were indeed on their way along with several other characters including Vice, Huajai, Takuma, King, Yuri, Billy Khan, K-Dash, Oswald, Classic Iori, Dark Ash, and an unidentified boss. There are also 7 bad allocation lines in the code, which some think is a hint that there were 7 other characters planned for the game, and others dispute this, claiming it's nothing really that special at all. While some people even question the validity of the aforementioned code, there definitely were 3 new characters that went unused, as seen on this image of early KOF-12 sprite concepts. KOF-12 was apparently also set to have teams, as suggested by some promotional artwork, and there was talk from Akihiko Ureshino that there would have been a kimono-wearing newcomer teaming up with Iori and Oswald. The reason for these characters being scrapped has been chalked up to how expensive it was for SNK to incorporate the art style for KOF-12 and KOF-13. KOF Maximum Impact Regulation A2 was a planned sequel to KOF Maximum Impact Regulation A, which was an upgrade to KOF Maximum Impact 2. Maximum Impact Regulation A2 was first announced at the 2007 Tokyo Game Show and was set for a PlayStation 2 and arcade release. The game then ended up getting put on hold for unknown reasons. There are images of the game's official logo online, as well as photographs from Tokyo Game Show, 2 of which appear to hint at the inclusion of Makoto Mizuguchi and Zhao Lan. On March 7th, 2019, Falcon tweeted that he had been working on 8 characters for the game, including Hotaru Futaba, Tizak the Griffin, Joe Higashi, Angel, an unnamed Nest member, an undead Hazoku member, a character with 5 personalities, and another Bert alongside Mingyong and Ninon. The game ultimately got cancelled and is now considered lost media. Alright, that was part 3/layer 3 of the ultimate SNK fighting game, Iceberg. Once again, I want to thank you all for watching. I want to thank my guest narrators, Vault and Tech. Do check out their stuff, it'll be in the description below. And of course, shout outs to RaitoADV for helping me out with this. And before I go, I want to update you all on one more thing concerning the SNK fighting game Iceberg series here. This will be the final video in which we only cover one layer. So just to be clear, from part 4 onwards, we're going to be covering more than just one layer. It might be 2, it might be 3, could be 4. I don't know, we're going to see how this goes. But yeah, again, thank you for watching, and until next time, I am Chris Lotus, Chrysalid, C49, all those freaking nicknames. You all take care of yourselves, be safe out there, be cool to each other, stay hydrated. See ya.